I spent 14 years hating a man for moving a fence 3 inches. Then a 17-year-old girl named Chloe handed me a coat that held an old phone, and a question I never thought to ask. What if the fence wasn't a theft, but a gift I was too blind to see? I measured that fence 3 inches and never measured the cost. Harold knew the voicemail but let me hate him. Evelyn's voicemail taught me it's never too late to be chosen again. Now. Not just any coat, an old tweed thing, worn at the elbows, with a lining that smelled of mothballs and lavender. The fabric was rough under my fingertips, the color a faded herringbone brown, like autumn leaves crushed and dried. Chloe found it in her grandmother's attic, buried under old Christmas decorations and a box of yellowed photographs. She said, "Mrs. Ashworth, I want to restore it for my mum's birthday. Can you help? I've been teaching sewing at the community center for 6 years now." Thursday afternoons, the same 5 or 6 teenagers who'd rather be on their phones, scrolling, tapping, their thumbs a blur while I tried to show them how to thread a needle. The room always smelled of dust and starch, and the fluorescent lights hummed a tired, constant note. But Chloe was different. She listened. She asked questions. And when she pulled that coat out of a plastic bag, something in my chest went tight, a knot I hadn't known was there. "Your grandmother kept this?" I asked, my voice coming out thinner than I'd intended. I could feel the weight of the coat in my hands, the way it held the shape of someone's shoulders. "She never got rid of anything," Chloe said, her eyes bright. "There's a pocket inside. I found an old phone in it, like, really old. One of those flip things." She laughed, a light, nervous sound. I didn't even know how to open it at first. I didn't think much of it then. I told her to start by unpicking the hem, to see how the lining was attached. She worked quietly while I watched, the scissors snicking through the old thread, the fabric sighing as it came apart. And I thought about my own grandmother's coat, the one I'd worn through every winter of my 20s, a green wool thing that smelled of wood smoke and rain. I'd lost it somewhere in a move, and I'd never forgiven myself. The memory came back sharp, the feel of the scratchy collar against my neck, the way the pockets held a worn handkerchief and a single mint. But that's not where this story starts. This story starts with a fence. Then. 14 years ago, I lived next door to Harold and Evelyn. Evelyn and I had been friends since before I could remember. We'd walk our dogs together, share cuttings from our gardens, sit on her porch with cups of tea that went cold because we talked so long. I can still see the way the steam curled off those mugs, the way she'd lean back in her chair and laugh until her sides ached. Harold was quiet, a bit gruff, but Evelyn softened him. She was the kind of person who made you feel like you mattered, like your small stories were worth hearing. Then Evelyn got sick. It was quick, pancreatic cancer, they said. 3 months from diagnosis to the funeral. I remember standing at the graveside, staring at the headstone, thinking, this can't be real. The ground was wet from a morning drizzle, and the smell of damp earth clung to my coat. We were supposed to grow old together, swapping stories about our grandchildren, comparing recipes, complaining about our knees. After she died, something shifted in Harold. He stopped saying hello. He put up a new fence between our properties, moved it 3 inches onto my side. 3 inches. I measured it. I was livid. I remember the heat rising to my face, the way I gripped the tape measure so hard my knuckles went white. I knocked on his door that same evening. He opened it, and his face was stone. No, not stone. It was more like a door that had been locked from the inside. "Harold, the fence. My property line. Leave it. That's not your property line. Your old fence was. Leave it, Margaret." And he shut the door. The wood clicked shut with a finality that echoed in my chest. I knew he was wrong. I measured it myself. But he wouldn't listen. He ignored every knock, every call. I could have pushed harder, but what was the point? He was a grieving widower, and I was a stubborn old woman. So I let it go. But I never forgave him. I carried that grudge like a stone in my pocket, turning it over and over until it was smooth and hard. We didn't speak for 14 years. Not a word. I'd see him in the garden and turn my back, my shoulders tight. He'd walk past my house and look the other way, his eyes fixed on the pavement. We were like two planets in separate orbits, passing close but never touching. I told myself I didn't care. I had my sewing class. I had my cat, Jasper, a scrawny rescue with a habit of escaping through the cat flap and wandering into Harold's yard. That cat was a menace. He'd dig up Harold's flower beds, knock over his bins, sit on his doorstep and yowl. And I'd have to go retrieve him. "You're a troublemaker," I'd say to Jasper, scooping him up while Harold glared from his kitchen window. The cat's fur was warm and rough, and he'd purr like a motor, oblivious. "But you're my troublemaker." Those encounters, if you could call them that, were the only contact we had. A silent exchange of annoyance. I'd mumble, "Sorry," under my breath, he'd turn away, and that was that. I'd feel a flicker of shame, then crush it. Now. Chloe came to class the next week with the phone from the pocket. It was a Nokia, maybe 15 years old, with a cracked screen and a dead battery. The plastic casing was a dull silver, the kind they used to call space age. She'd charged it at home, and it still worked. The screen glowed a pale blue, like a forgotten star. "There's a voicemail on it," she said, holding it out to me. "From someone named Evelyn." I didn't listen to it, I figured it might be private. Her voice was soft, uncertain. I felt the blood drain from my face. The room seemed to tilt. "Evelyn? Your neighbor? The one who died? My gran used to be friends with her, I think." Chloe shrugged, oblivious to the tremble in my hands. My hand started shaking. I took the phone from her, small and cold in my palm. The screen showed one voice message. I pressed play, holding it to my ear. The speaker crackled, then Evelyn's voice, warm, a little breathless, just as I remembered. It was like hearing a ghost. "Margaret, it's me. I know I should have said this in person, but I'm a coward. The fence thing, it's not Harold's fault. It's mine. I asked him to move it because I wanted more space for my roses. I thought you'd be angry at me for taking the garden, so I made him lie. I know that's stupid. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have told you before. I hope you can forgive him. And me." The message ended. I stood there, frozen, in the middle of the community center, while Chloe watched me with wide eyes. The fluorescent light buzzed in my ears, and the smell of starch and dust felt suffocating. "Mrs. Ashworth? Are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I was 100 miles away, in Evelyn's kitchen 14 years ago, drinking tea and laughing about nothing. I could see her hands, the way she stirred her tea, the silver ring on her finger. How could she have thought I'd be angry about roses? I would have given her the whole garden. I would have dug up the flowers myself. But she didn't ask. She died thinking I'd hate her. And I spent 14 years hating Harold for a lie he never asked to tell. Then. The shame hit me like a wave, hot, sickening, unstoppable. It rose from my stomach, burned my throat. I handed the phone back to Chloe with a mumbled thank you, and I left the class early. The autumn air hit my face, cold and sharp, but I barely felt it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Jasper curled on my chest. The cat's warmth was a small comfort, but my mind raced. I thought about Harold, alone in his house, carrying that secret for Evelyn, letting me judge him all those years. I thought about the fence, the 3 inches, the silence. What did he think of me? What did he feel when I turned away from him at the supermarket, when I let my cat ruin his garden, when I never once said, "I'm sorry for your loss," after Evelyn died? I replayed every snub, every cold shoulder, every time I'd walked past him without a word. The shame made me want to pull the covers over my head and never come out. I was the monster. Not him. Now. The next morning, I got dressed, pulled on my old cardigan, the one with the missing button, put the phone in my pocket, and walked next door. It was a Thursday, October 15th. The anniversary of Evelyn's funeral. I knew because I'd marked it on my calendar every year, crossed it out in red pen, never told a soul. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and waiting. I thought about forcing the door, but that was dramatic. Instead, I went to the cemetery. I knew where her grave was. I'd visited every year, in secret, after dark so Harold wouldn't see me. I'd stand there and talk to her about nothing, about the weather, about my sewing class. I never told her about the feud. I pretended everything was fine. But this time, I went in daylight. The cemetery was quiet, the grass damp with dew. Leaves, gold and red, lay scattered on the paths, and a cold wind blew through the trees, carrying the smell of wet earth and decaying flowers. I sat down on the grass beside her headstone, the cold seeping through my trousers. I pulled out the phone. I played the message again. Then a third time. Then a fourth. Each time, Evelyn's voice wound through me like a thread. "Evelyn," I whispered, my voice cracking. "You absolute fool. I would have loved your roses." I imagined them, climbing roses, maybe, deep red or pale pink, the kind that smell like honey. I could almost see her smiling, her hands dirt-stained, tucking a bloom behind her ear. I stayed there for an hour. The leaves were turning, gold and red, and the wind picked up, rustling through the headstones. I thought about what I was going to do. I could go to Harold and apologize. I could show him the message. I could end this 14-year silence with a simple, "I was wrong." But would that be fair? He'd spent all that time hating me, or thinking I hated him, or just, nothing. Maybe he'd moved on. Maybe he didn't care anymore. The grass was cold under my hands, and I felt the weight of every year I'd wasted. I decided I had to try. Then and now meet. I went back to his house that evening. The lights were on in the living room, a warm, yellow glow through the curtains. I knocked. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The door opened, and there he was. Older, thinner, his hair white as frost. He looked at me with the same stone face he'd worn 14 years ago, but I noticed something new, a weariness around his eyes, a slight tremor in his hands. "Margaret." "Harold. I need to tell you something." "What?" His voice was flat, guarded. I played a voicemail. "From Evelyn. She left it on an old phone. She told me about the fence. She said she made you move it, that she wanted the garden space. She was sorry she never told me." He didn't move. His face didn't change. The silence stretched, and I could hear the ticking of a clock inside. "I know," he said. "You know?" "I've known since she recorded it. I found the phone after she died. I listened to it. I knew she'd left it for you, but I couldn't bring myself to give it to you. I thought you'd think less of her. I thought you'd be angry at her, not me." He paused, and I saw his jaw tighten. I didn't want her memory tarnished. She was a good woman. The lie was small. I figured I could take the blame. It didn't matter. "It did matter," I said, my voice cracking. "I've been terrible to you. For 14 years. I let my cat dig up your garden. I ignored you. You're not the only one," he said, and his voice softened, just a fraction. "I could have told you. I could have given you the phone. I chose not to. I chose to let you hate me. I think I needed someone to blame after she died." His eyes flickered, and for a moment I saw the grief he'd been carrying. We stood there in the doorway, the cold night air between us. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to cry. I did neither. Can we start over? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. The porch light cast shadows on his face. Then he said, I don't know how to do that. I nodded. Me neither. But I'd like to try. He stepped back, and I followed him inside. The house smelled of old wood and dust, and the floorboards creaked under my feet. In the living room, a single lamp burned on a side table. There were photos of Evelyn on the mantelpiece, her smiling, her holding a bouquet, her arm around Harold. I felt a pang in my chest. The next few weeks were awkward. We had tea together twice, sitting in his living room, making small talk about the weather, the garden, Jasper. Every conversation felt fragile, like walking on ice. I could hear the clock ticking, the rattle of cups, the soft hiss of the kettle. I didn't push. He didn't apologize, and neither did I. But we were talking. And that felt like a small miracle. Chloe finished the coat. She'd replaced the lining, mended the elbows, sewn on new buttons, bone-colored, smooth to the touch. She brought it to class to show me. It looked beautiful, the tweed cleaned, the stitching neat. Inside, she'd sewn a small patch with her grandmother's initials, E.S., in pale blue thread. My mum cried when she saw it, Chloe said, her face bright. She said it was like having a piece of her back. I smiled. You did good work, Chloe. I couldn't have done it without you. You taught me everything. She hugged me, and I felt something loosen in my chest. This was why I taught. This, the quiet joy of passing something on, of making something new from something old. That evening, I took the coat home. It was still in my car. I'd promised to drop it off at Chloe's house, but I wanted to see it one more time. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of it, the decades of wear. The fabric was soft, worn smooth in places. I brought it to my face and inhaled, the faint scent of mothballs and lavender, and underneath, something else. Something like memory. And I thought about Evelyn's coat. She'd had a tweed one, too. I remembered her wearing it on winter walks, her hands shoved in the pockets, her breath pluming in the cold air. I remembered the way she'd laugh at my jokes, the way she'd talk about Harold like he was the only man in the world. I missed her. I missed her so much that it ached. I drove to Harold's house. I knocked. He opened the door. You again? There was a hint of a smile, the first I'd seen in years. I need to show you something. I handed him the coat. He looked at it, confused, his fingers tracing the tweed. Chloe's grandmother's coat, I said. Chloe, a girl from my class. She restored it. There was a phone inside, with Evelyn's message. He took the coat, running his fingers over the tweed, his brow furrowed. Then his eyes widened. This is Evelyn's coat. What? Look at the label. He turned it over, and I saw inside the collar, a faded tag, Evelyn Sharp. The name was almost worn away, but it was there. That was her maiden name, he said. She had a coat like this when we first met. She lost it somewhere. She was heartbroken. His voice broke on the last word. We stared at each other. The air between us felt thick, full of unspoken meanings. Chloe's grandmother must have found it, I said. Or. I don't know. It's the same coat. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Can I keep it? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded. I think it belongs to you. He held it to his chest, and for the first time in 14 years, I saw him cry. His shoulders shook, and the coat crumpled in his arms. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching him let go of something he'd held for so long. The Pyrrhic part, nothing was fully mended. Harold and I never became friends, not really. We had tea a few more times, but the silence had been too long. The conversations were polite, careful, like walking on eggshells. He died 6 months later, peacefully, in his sleep. I found out from the postman, who handed me a stack of mail and said, "Sorry about your neighbor." I went to his funeral. I stood at the back, among the few dozen people who showed up. The church smelled of damp wood and flowers, and the organ music was low and mournful. A few people spoke about him, a quiet man, a good gardener, a loyal husband. I didn't speak. I didn't deserve to. But I brought Evelyn's coat. The one Chloe had restored. I hung it over the back of an empty chair in the front row, for him to see. For her to see. The tweed caught the light, and I saw the shadow of her initials, stitched on the inside. Small daily routines can quietly save a life. For me, it was the sewing class. The act of teaching, of mending fabric, of watching teenagers find patience and pride in their hands. It kept me going when I felt alone. It gave me a reason to get up on Thursdays. And Jasper, that troublemaker cat, he kept me connected, even when I didn't want to be. Every time he escaped into Harold's garden, I had to go over, had to see Harold's face, had to remember that I was still part of the world. The coat hangs in my wardrobe now. I look at it every morning. The tweed is dusty, the elbows patched. I remember Evelyn. I remember Harold. I remember the fence that wasn't worth fighting over. I don't hate him anymore. I don't hate myself either. And that's the thing about late-blooming light. It doesn't arrive like a sunrise, it sneaks in through the cracks, through a cat flap, through a coat pocket, through a voicemail left 14 years too late. You just have to be willing to see it. I think Evelyn would have liked that. Evelyn's voicemail changed everything in an instant. Have you ever received a message that rewrote your past? If this story made you feel the weight of years wasted on pride, hit like. If you're carrying a secret you never meant to keep, you're in the right place.